We're good. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call our regularly scheduled meeting of the EID Board of Directors to order for March 13th, 2023. Jen, roll call, please.
Directors Osborne, Dwyer, Veerkamp, and Zini, and Day present. Acting General Manager Mueller, General Counsel Polson, and Board Clerk Sullivan present. General Manager Abercrombie is absent.
Okay, would everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Here. Ready? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We have the adoption of the agenda. Second motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Any public in the audience? Anybody online, Jen?
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is for any comment on the adoption of today's agenda. President Veerkamp, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak.
All right, thank you very much. Communications, general managers, and.
Actually, we have to call for the vote
Oh,
on
I'm
the
sorry. Yeah, we
adoption of
probably
the
ought to do that.
agenda, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer.
Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Now, communications, general manager, employee recognition, Mr. Mueller.
Nothing today, thank you.
Nothing today, all right, thank you. Public comment. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak that's not on the agenda?
If members of the public would like to address the board with any items not appearing on today's agenda, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Veerkamp, it does not appear there are any members wishing to speak on our open public comment period.
All right, thank you, Jen. Communications, general manager, sitting general manager today. Ryan, anything?
Nothing, just a quick operational report. Everything's fairly quiet on the storm front over the weekend. Thanks to our staff working over the weekend. 2 areas, both our Camino Heights wastewater plant and the El Dorado lift station in Diamond Springs, we're continuing to pump wastewater out of there and transfer that down to Deer Creek just to maintain some storage of those ponds. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess I have a question about that, Tracy. You know, with the upcoming big storm tonight and tomorrow, it's really impacted our collection system. Are we postured and ready to start trucking things if we have to? And
Good morning, Board Member Dwyer. Tracy Crane, wastewater operations manager. Yes, we have, not only do we have staff that are working 12-hour days with our 2 pumper trucks, but we also have emergency POs set up should we need them with contract haulers to help us. And we have some trigger points set so that we know when we get down to only this much storage, that's when we'll go ahead and bring in more resources.
so you anticipate that we'll have to exercise that option, or?
We've gotten less rain than they said that we were gonna get, but it's sort of, I anticipate that we may have to. I'd still like to withhold, or I still hold a little bit of hope that we won't have to, but it's looking likely that we may need a little bit of outside assistance before this week is up.
Okay, and of course, the other major concern is the fragile pipeline that goes from Mud Springs to the top of the hill. that we have scheduled to replace, but that one, last time we had a incident, we had issues, yeah. So I'm sure there's nothing you can do about it standing here today, but we certainly need to recognize and expedite the replacement of that pipeline.
And I will say, we do have pressure and flow meters on that system, and that we are maintaining it at what we think is the maximum rate that we can get at the lowest pressure and keep flowing through it. But that's the reason why, most likely, that reduced pumping capacity is the reason why we may need some outside resources.
Thank you very much.
Fingers crossed. Yes, Al, Director Day.
Yeah, just a quick question. I noticed our drought emergency declaration hasn't been on the agenda. And obviously, I understand why that could be, but I am a little confused because I notice on our website, we still have the 15% call for voluntary conservation. From what I was reading, the governor has tweaked his emergency order, but didn't necessarily rescind that. So I'm just wondering where we're at on that. I would support us not having it, but.
Yeah, Director Day, you are exactly right. The governor has relaxed certain of the requirements of his emergency drought declaration, but the requirements for mandatory conservation are still in place. And in his most recent executive order, I think it was a couple weeks ago, he directed his administration, namely the State Water Resources Control Board, to report back by, I believe it's April 1st, with a report as to whether or not those conservation regulations should be maintained. Given what we're all seeing, I very much expect that they will be relaxed. But as of today, the mandatory requirement to conserve and to implement the measures of our water shortage contingency plan remain in effect, which is why we continue to advertise on our website and so forth that those provisions are in play. We removed the emergency declaration from the agenda because, number one, there was no need for us to continue to publicly ratify the emergency declaration, given that there were no legal provisions. There were no legal requirements for us to do that. We didn't have, for example, consultants performing work under the emergency declaration. That would be one thing that might require us to continue to ratify, much like we've done for the Caldor fire emergency. But in this particular case, there was no need for us to do that, so we removed it from the agenda.
Yes.
Just an addendum to that, in first time in 4 years, they've opened the gates at Oroville Dam to release the pressure, so. I had about $5,000 worth of storm damage. I'm on my way to my insurance company today after the meeting to have a little discussion.
All right, very good. That was under Brian's report. We'll get to director's reports here in just a minute. But Jen, do you have anything that you need to add in?
No, thank you.
All right, now board directors, any other comments? Probably made most of them. Pat, you good? Lori? All right, we will move on to approval of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Any public? Yes, sir. Yep. Any public input? All right, Jen, anybody from the?
If members of the
outside
public
world.
would like to address the board on the approval of today's consent calendar, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Day, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Camp, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the approval of today's consent calendar. We're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we are at action items now. Item 6, finance.
There's no presentation today. It is
Okay.
just the ratification of the warrant registers.
All right, and I will, Okay. Got a motion. I will be recusing myself on the vote on this item.
Second.
Director Day will take over.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comment or questions? Do we have any public comment or questions on item 6?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 6, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Osborne, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. Vice President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak. I believe we're ready for the vote. And for the record, just make sure it was clear, President Veerkamp will be recusing himself from this item.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. Item 7, Finance. Jamie?
Okay. Good morning, President Veerkamp, members of the board. I'm Jamie Bandy, Director of Finance. This morning's item is our cost of service analysis, contract award. Next slide, please. Some previous board action. April of 2020, the board adopted the results of the 2020 cost of service analysis and approved rate increases as set forth in the 2020 Proposition 218 notice. More recently, last year, November of 2022, the board adopted the 2023 to 2027 Capital Improvement Plan. In December, the board also adopted the 2023 to 2024 operating budget, as well as the 2023 to 2027 financial plan, subject to board-approved cost of service study this year in 2023. In January of this year, the board did receive an overview of the requirements and the process of the cost of service analysis. And at our last meeting, February 27th, we brought forth the contract award, and at that time, the board did postpone the consideration of the award, to today's meeting. Next slide. Okay, so summary of issue, the district is just looking to update their cost of service analysis, which is needed to make sure that the district is developing cost-based and equitable rates for their services. Anytime we do consider increasing our water, wastewater, and recycled rates, there are requirements that are established by Proposition 218. And just to kind of remind everybody, the cost of service analysis is the process of developing rates that meet but do not exceed the costs that are required to provide those services. Next slide. So the district issued a request for proposal for cost of service analysis. As detailed in that RFP, what we were looking for is a consultant basically to review any of our relevant background documents, incorporate the district's rate-setting policy principles, establish any revenue requirements. We do recommend those rates over a 5-year period, which is in accordance with our American Water Works Association principles. And then finally, the consultant is asked to provide a final cost of service analysis report. Next slide. So the district received 3 proposals in response to our RFP. As shown here on today's slide, our proposals received were from Raftellus, NBS, and Carollo Engineers. Raftellus did come in with the lowest proposed cost at $83,777. NBS proposed cost is $115,750. And finally, Corollo's proposed cost is $159,532. Taking a look at the slide here, this is basically comparing the key aspects of the proposals that staff considered in formulating their recommendation. We looked at the proposed cost as well as the years of experience from both the project manager as well as the proposed key staff, the total hours proposed, as well as the average cost per hour. So looking kind of across the board, Raftellus, their project managers, just to note that they did propose 2 separate project managers, one for water as well as one for wastewater, just to ensure that they could meet the schedule. The 2 proposed managers independently have 17 years and 24 years of experience. The key staff that they proposed combined have a total of 6 years of experience. Their total hours are $385, which based on their proposed cost, did equate out to be $217 per hour. Looking at NBS, their project manager has over 40 years of experience. Their key staff combined has over 75 years of experience. The total hours that they proposed is 544, which averaged out to about just under $213 per hour, pardon me. And lastly, Corollo, 16 years for their project manager, 21 years of experience for their key staff. They proposed, similar to NBS, about 540 hours with a total cost of about $295 per hour. Based on the information you see here, NBS does have the most years of experience at the lowest average hourly cost.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, it was on. A question regarding the number of hours proposed by, what is it, NCS. They are, can you go back one slide, please? Okay, they proposed 385 hours, where NBS is proposing 544 hours. If NBS does not use all those hours, are we going to be still charged the full amount?
Will be charged based on the number of hours that it takes to do the study.
So say, for instance, they end up using only 385 hours, we're going to save money.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so the 3 proposals received were reviewed by a team of 6 senior and mid-level management staff. At this time, staff does recommend awarding the contract to NBS. While they were not the lowest cost, NBS does represent the best value. Their proposal does demonstrate a very clear understanding of the scope. They have an excellent track record of successful completion of similar studies for other agencies, and they did propose a sufficient amount of time to complete the analysis. As kind of pointed out on the last slide, NBS did propose approximately 40% more labor hours than the lowest bidder, Raftellus, which is also consistent with the amount of hours that Corollo proposed. Additionally, that amount of hours is consistent with the analysis and the time frame that the district expected. Next slide, please. Lastly, NBS's proposal also identifies the best qualified staff, including relevant prior experience with EID. Again, the proposed project manager, who also served as the project manager for 2010, has over 40 years of experience in financial, economic, and cost of service rate analysis for municipal water and wastewater agencies. They've also proposed a senior technical review staff to provide additional industry-wide experience. He has over 25 years of experience with financial and rate consulting experience. He was also formerly with Raftellus, so while he was not a part of the 2010 cost of service, he does bring a fresh perspective to this year's analysis. And then lastly, the key staff that NBS proposed does have a combined more than 50 years of experience. Again, just our process schedule, still looking to have our kickoff meeting and begin in March, doing our cost of service analysis and our rate design analysis in the spring and summer. We will conduct our public meetings and workshops, as well as issuing our Proposition 218 notices in late summer, early fall. We will hold our public rate hearing then in October, November timeframe, just in time to do our operating budget workshop, as well as the budget adoption in October and November of this year. Anytime we do rate increases, do a cost of service analysis, customer education is vital. It is also consistent with the district's principles for guiding the rate setting process. The district will be vigilant in its public outreach to ensure that the study is conducted in a transparent manner. We will hold the public workshops and a rate hearing prior to the adoption of any rate increases. The district will utilize social media outlets such as Facebook and Nextdoor app to do a lot of our outreach, as well as traditional outlets such as the district's website, the waterfront newsletter, our email subscription, and any local print media. Finally, our board options. Option 1, award a contract to NBS Government Finance Group in the not-to-exceed amount of $115,750 for conducting a cost of service analysis. Option 2, take other action as directed by the board, or option 3, take no action. And staff recommends option 1.
All right, any questions for Ms. Bandy? No?
I'll move option 1.
I will second.
Yep. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further questions, comments? No? Yes?
Yeah, just the, trying to read my own notes. But, no, I'm not going to be able to agree with this. I think much like when we do our change of auditors, when we get outside legal counsel, we do it because we want a truly independent review and opinion. And I don't think we'll be getting that. It's NBS, for all their competence and experience, they're very much, it's like an in-house project. In fact, we might as well bring it in-house and save the $115,000 and just do it ourselves. Jim himself said a couple of times, it'll be great to get fresh eyes on this. Again, I don't think these are as freshest eyes that we could get. And also, I'm a little bit bothered by our RFP, which said that the consultants could do video conferencing, they could do in-person, they could do either or both. We didn't specify that we actually preferred face-to-face meetings, which I think we should have, if that's, and it was last meeting, one of the key criteria that staff said made NBS better, even though they cost more. So I'm very uncomfortable with the direction this is going.
Thank you, Director Day. Director Anzini?
Yeah, and let me put in my microphone. I agree along the concept of first, when I first got on, it was one of my, serious attentions was that cost of services study needed to be done. And we did do it in-house. It actually, at some point, we had one full meeting and the staff had done the review, and then we did the Zoom meeting. We took our time in getting to that point, and before we approved the budget, we approved that last internal COS survey. My concerns with this one, and I believe I said that then, I felt we needed to have a different perspective on that, to have an outside view of this. And so this is what's happening, which is very good. Staff is doing that. They're going outside. My biggest concern, I think, was one, it is the cost. The other one is, if it works out that we know what's going to happen today, that NBS will get the contract. However, if it's less than the hourly rate or the less hours that they'll be using, in the long run, we may save money. I don't know. Only all of us will know when we find out in September, when the real rubber hits the road on that one. The important thing is I looked at the other agencies that were compared. And I didn't recognize a lot of the agencies that NBS had versus the other agencies, which were close. Most of them were closer agencies, Placer Water, Nevada Irrigation. And I just kind of felt that that broad depth of information was great. However, you need to compare with local water agencies because we are always being compared to other water agencies. And the other agency for, I think, Raptelis actually used Sacramento. And so they had worked in the SMUD area, and they had also worked with the Sacramento Sacramento Water District. So I just felt that in comparisons, that they may have had more experience locally, and that's why I don't want to spend more money on something where maybe this review is not as fresh as we need it to be, so.
Thank you, Director Anzini. Director Dwyer?
Just curious, from our last session, I think we thought we might invite the bidders to come and have a say or comment on this item. So do we have any of the potential contractors available to speak?
We do. So we have Mr. Greg Klumpner here in with us today, as well as Sanjay Gear is on our Zoom, and then we also have a representative from Raptelis joining us via Zoom as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
When are we going to hear that?
Let them know.
Probably should have heard them before we did the motion.
So I'm Greg Klumpner with NBS. We'd love to work with you again. I think we understand the district pretty well. Open. Oh, sure. Happy to answer any questions you have. In terms of having a second opinion, outside opinion, Sanjay Gar is well-known in the industry. He's part of our team. We specifically brought him in to make sure that we have a full rounded perspective on the district's rates. So we're both here to answer any questions you guys have. He's on Zoom. I don't know if you can show him,
Dr. Dwyer, do you have a
put
question?
him up on the screen.
I do. Maybe more of a comment than a question. You know, in the good old days, in the wild and woolly days, you just took the cost of operations of the water, for an example, divided it by the number of customers and came up with a flat rate. Those days are gone. And with the increased regulation oversight, our rate setting mechanism has become more complex, and not only from outside agencies, but also looking internally on how do we try to equitably and fairly divide up the cost between different classes of customers. So I think the complexity is increasing each year, and certainly expertise in the field and experience is important. And I don't think it's really like an audit where we need fresh eyes to look at what we've done. I think it's more a partnership that says, okay, here's what staff says, here's what outside experience says, how do we meld those things together, and then reach out to the public and be as transparent as we can, saying, here's the answer on how we're going to allocate those costs. And there's a million ways to allocate costs that are acceptable according to general accounting principles. And so that cost allocation is really the key to how do we proceed. And there's a lot of opinions, sometimes strong opinions about those allocations. And that's what we really need to do to move forward. That wasn't a question, I guess.
Just a comment. Do we have the other gentleman on? Is there any?
Yes, good evening. Good morning, everyone. It looks like from Greg's expression you can hear me. Thank you for providing this opportunity to hear your concerns and comments. Just a couple of points. One is I have when I worked with Raftellus, I was the project manager for Placer County. I assisted them with their cost allocation plan, and also I worked with Amador. And then I've also worked with Mammoth. So I've worked with a lot of agencies in the mountain regions, and I'm familiar with some of the challenges that you face with making sure water is affordable and that we can have it at the reasonable cost and meet the cost of service principles. In addition, I've assisted a lot of agencies in making sure rates are defensible with Prop 218 and with court cases associated with that. So the reason why Greg reached out to me is that he wanted me to be involved in helping provide that scrutiny, that extra layer of scrutiny. And I always enjoy giving Greg a hard time. So now I get to hopefully get paid to do it. So,
Sir, do you mind terribly just stating your name for the record?
yeah, sorry about that. My name is Sanjay Gar.
Yes.
He's part of our team. He's actually a separate contractor. Yeah. His group is Water Economics, Inc. So, yeah, he's by himself.
There's some, okay.
I just want to, is there anyone from Raftellus that would like to speak at this time? If so, please raise your hand at the bottom of the screen, and I can allow you permission to talk. You want to sit down just so they feel. And if you're participating via phone, you just click, I just want to give them *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. Okay, she's wishing to speak.
Hello, this is Teresa Duritich with Raftellus.
Hi there, we can hear you.
Great. I wasn't prepared to speak, but if you have any questions about our proposal, please let me know, and I'll do my best to answer those.
Questions, Director Day?
All right, sounds like we've let everybody speak that's wanted to speak.
Thank you, Teresa.
All right, thanks.
And we have a motion and a second. Ready for the vote, Jen?
We're going to have to call
I'm
for
sorry,
public comment, but
public
just
comment.
give me 1
other
second so
people
I
weighing in here?
can lower, so I can mute. Hold on. If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 7, the award of a contract to conduct the cost of service analysis, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne, this is your time to speak. Please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda, but I will call those out for you. If you are participating via computer, you just hover down, or most computers, you hover down to the bottom of the screen and you click that raise your hand button, and I will allow the permission to talk on this side. If you're only participating via phone, you press the *9 button on your phone. That will raise your hand here. I will allow permission to speak. Then the *6 mutes and unmutes. So it's *9 on the telephone and raise hand on the computer. And this is for comment on action item number 7, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne. President Veerkamp, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 7. Option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne. I believe that we are ready for the vote.
Right. Thank you very much. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, and 4 voting aye. Division 5 voting no. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bandy. Item 8, Office of General Counsel, Ms. Leeper. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, President Veerkamp and members of the board. I'm Elizabeth Leeper, Senior Deputy General Counsel for the district, and I will be introducing this item today and then turning it over to our lobbyist for even more detail. So today, for the board's consideration, we have proposed positions for the district to take on existing proposed state legislation at the Capitol. As the board is aware, the district has worked with our existing lobbyist, REEB Government Relations, for the past 2 decades, and the board has taken formal positions on state legislation over that period of time. So in cooperation with district staff, our state legislative advocate, otherwise known as lobbyist, Bob Reeb of Reeb Government Relations, has analyzed the numerous proposed state bills at our legislature, and today we're recommending formal positions on 21 bills that may impact the district's interests. As you can imagine, the bills that you're being asked to consider today cover a very wide range of subject matters, which is consistent with what we do here at the district. Perhaps fittingly for today, there's discussion of atmospheric rivers and legislation regarding atmospheric rivers, climate resilience, water storage and supply, public works and contracting matters. The California Environmental Quality Act is always an active area, as well as numerous water quality issues. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Reeb of Reeb Government Relations. He can give you more detail about the bills we're considering today.
Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Mr. President, board members, staff, and members of the public. Good to be here with you today. I'd like to start with just some brief introductory comments before I get into the bill packet. As you know, we're in the first year of a 2-year legislative session, and thus far we've had meet and greet meetings with Assemblymember Megan Daly and Assemblymember Joe Patterson, and we're still working on securing a meeting with Senator Alvarado Gill. The state budget is review process is underway, and we are working with at least 2 different coalitions right now on budget items. The first is a coalition that is supporting Governor Newsom's budget request for the State Water Resources Control Board. It's a $31.5 million one-time general fund appropriation that would fund the second year of the State Water Board's efforts to modernize its water right administration system. They have literally paper in boxes in storage warehouses around Sacramento that contains water right permits and licenses and terms and conditions. So they're needing to spend some money to get those digitized and accessible to the staff so that they can across a broad range of water rights administration. It's helping them to determine water supply availability, who's drawing water from what streams and river systems, who's diverting to storage, what time of the year they're diverting directly. All this information digitized so that it will make their job of administering water rights more efficient and more effective.
Just a comment on that one.
Yes.
The state doesn't really have a real good track record with implementing automated systems. So I'm concerned that this might be a very, very expensive endeavor.
Right.
You think?
I'm familiar with the past Oracle and different software and billing software challenge the state has had. We're hoping this one's a little more simpler, more data management, and not trying to deal with eligibility determinations and payments and things like that. So fingers crossed on that one. Second coalition that we've been spending time with is the Dam Safety Coalition. This is an effort by mostly Aqua members up and down the state of California that are seeking to obtain state financial assistance for upgrading dams in terms of safety, rehabilitation, repairs, and what have you. The coalition has been advocating with the Department of Water Resources and the Newsom administration to get a formal state program stood up to allow for the state to participate financially in these projects. It's been about a 2-year effort. The good news is that the Newsom administration does have a budget trailer bill that would create a dam safety program within the Department of Water Resources. More good news is that the Newsom proposed budget includes $75 million of state funding that would support that program. The Dam Safety Coalition that we've been working with is requesting $850 million for that program. This would be a 50-50 cost share, 50% state money, 50% local cost match. I am pleased to tell you today that while the Dam Safety Coalition will be advocating to get this funding into both AB 1567 and SB 867, which are in the bill packet. These are the state general obligation bond measures that the Assembly Democrats and the Senate Democrats are taking the lead on. We've got the language at $1 billion in Senate Bill 638, which should be in print today or tomorrow. That's a bill that's sponsored by the California Central Valley Flood Control Association and written by yours truly, because they're a client of our firm. So a little point of personal privilege being able to take a priority for other clients and get it into a bill that's sponsored by one of our other clients.
Bob, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In that $1 billion, excuse me, in that $1 billion, is there intended to be grant money? Because I'm looking forward down the road, we're gonna have to rebuild Silver Dam, and if we could get 50% of that cost by the state would be immense. So,
That's the plan. Yeah, that's the plan. It's a 50% state match. So if a project costs $100 million, you'd get $50 million from the state, $50 million local.
Thank you.
And the reason that I'm bumping it up to the 1 billion is because a lot of these other projects are closer to being shovel-ready than Silver Lake Dam. It's my understanding that you're looking at, is it 2027 for actually, breaking that down and rebuilding it. So we wanted to make sure, our firm wanted to make sure that while you're supporting this effort is to help others first, count on them being there when you need your funding, and to have sufficient funding in this bond measure that we hope to get on the 2024 ballot so that it won't run out of money by the time you're ready to go with your project.
Thank you.
So today's packet, I'm going to focus more on the water right legislation, which we've been spending a significant amount of time on this last 3 to 4 weeks, and also the bond measures that I mentioned. Our firm has been working on the bond measures at the level of the California Municipal Utilities Association and the Association of California Water Agencies. Both of these state organizations have work groups of their membership that come together with staff and really advocate for the needs of their clients or their members. So for us, we're involved seeking to make sure that all of our clients are eligible for as many of the programs that are anticipated to be in these bond measures. So for EID, obviously, we're looking at, water recycling, water storage in terms of converting your reservoirs to tanks, steel tanks or concrete. We're looking at conveyance funding. which will be important for the flume, the final mile of pieces of flume that need to be upgraded. We're looking for safe drinking water funding, recreation, kind of whatever you touch. We're trying to get into those bond funds at sufficient funding and with the type of language that will ensure that EID will be eligible to compete for funding in whatever the final bond that works, that gets onto the ballot. What we didn't include today, which we have in the past, are these what we call watch bills or spot bills. Usually you'll see like 20 or 30 of them in your packet. We decided not to muck it up with you guys and your time. We have those bills flagged, and we're keeping an eye on them for you. The deadline for submitting amendments to the respective rules committees to get those bills into a substantive form is today. So we might be back next month with another, 10 or 20 of those bills, depending on what we see. I'm hoping we don't, but we'll know more later this week when those things get into print. So let me jump into the bill packet. Kind of the typical bills that we see each year, but this kind of talk about AB 249. There's continued interest in the environmental justice and social justice communities to continue to look at lead testing at our public schools. We've done this. In fact, a few years back, we opposed a bill that would have required the community water systems like the district to undertake and pay for the testing. We were able to narrow the scope of that legislation. This one comes back at a time when the US EPA is undergoing a revision of their lead and copper rule that will then affect the testing at school sites, for example. So we're going to oppose this bill in a not favor. It's consistent with the California Municipal Utilities Association, Aqua, and the California Special Districts Association. We're asking for the legislature to hold off on determining new mandates for community water systems like the district until US EPA finishes their process. The concern is that if California moves ahead of the federal, and the federal's different than California, that we'll have to do it twice. Yes, sir.
Our standard policy is we're testing our water consistently, and I believe we test for lead. I mean, don't we? I mean, in our review, I mean, so this would be just another thing on top of what we have to do or we're existing doing.
Yeah, this is a CITUS requirement so that you have to go to the public schools in your service area and test, I believe it's up to 5 connections, whether it's a drinking fountain or the coffee maker in the teacher's room, and make sure that there's no lead or elevated lead levels at those locations. So typically what's happening is, and it's not so much here in your county because most of the schools, are newer, but some of the areas that have older schools that were built in the 1940s, 1950s, even 1960s that are still being utilized may have lead service lines or lead in the components of the drinking water fountain or something like that. So what this bill does is it requires the public water system that may be in compliance with the lead and copper rule, the water that is going between you and the customer, now it requires you to go onto the customer side of the meter and do this analysis and recommendations. So probably something that makes sense in rural areas where you're compensated for doing that because the schools don't have the expertise to do this type of sampling. But to have it be an unfunded mandate, that's a whole nother issue. AB 460 is the first of 3 bills that we've identified that that proposes to implement recommendations from a Planning and Conservation League sponsored analysis that was done maybe a year and a half ago. The analysis was conducted by law professors, a former member of the State Water Resources Control Board, and a couple of attorneys. It had 11 recommendations. really the foundation of this bill and the other two that I'll highlight. There's a strong movement on the part of the environmental justice, Native American tribes and environmental community, fisheries community to essentially tear up the water rights system that we have now in terms of the allocation of water, which, as you know, is a first in time, first in right basis. So if you're El Dorado Irrigation District, and you have some water rights that go back to the 1850s, 1860s. Well, those in their mind were done unfairly. And so we have the 21st century where we have different needs. We have these water rights that maybe go back 150 years. That doesn't work, so we need to just tear it up and start all over. That, of course, is a direct threat to water districts up and down the state. I mean, the water rights are the foundation for the billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in dams, conveyance systems, drinking water treatment plants, wastewater plants, recycled plants. If you take that foundation, you tear it down, you don't have a reliable water supply, and you have stranded investments that your taxpayers and ratepayers have been paying for, for a long time. So these bills would give the State Water Resources Control Board new, very broad, almost unfettered authority to not only reopen water rights, including pre-1914 water rights, which are those that existed before the State Water Commission was created, but to change the allocation, change the priority, change the amount. Aqua, California Municipal Utilities Association, virtually every Aqua member agency is opposing these three bills. This AB 460 is the first. AB 1337 would be another bill, water shortage enforcement that
Bob,
gives.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
What's your sense of momentum for those bills?
Right, so AB 460 is authored by the chair of the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. Typically, committee chairs have a lot of ability to move bills, even if there's significant opposition. So I've been spending many hours each week working with some of my colleague water lobbying firms. And last Monday, I was on a call, invited to participate on a call with agriculture, production, commodity groups, California Chamber of Commerce to brief them on this bill and others and what it means for them. We also, a team of us are reaching out to the California Building Industry Association, the California Business Properties Association, the California Manufacturing Technology Association, the unions, the schools. I mean, we're reaching out to everyone just to educate them about the threat of these bills. For example, you're required when a city or county receives a subdivision map request they'll send out to the district, do you have sufficient water supply available to provide water over the next 20 years for this project and still can meet the needs of your customers? Those written supply assessments and written verifications will be very difficult to provide if your water rights foundation is cut out from underneath you. So I think the cities and counties have a dog in this fight as well. None of us think we're going to be able to stop this bill in her committee since she's the chair, but we're trying to get Democratic and Republican no votes. We're focusing on the next step, which is the Assembly Appropriations Committee, because the bill's keyed fiscal, and that committee is chaired by a Los Angeles area Democrat, and the Los Angeles Department of Water Power doesn't like this bill. San Francisco PUC doesn't like this bill. That would be Assemblymember Phil Ting, the Budget Committee Chair. So we're hoping there's some synergy between those two chairs to maybe try and get this bill on the suspense file, and either keep it there or have it come out with amendments that we can be comfortable with. But we're looking at floor votes after that. We're looking at the next House. We're kind of mapping our strategy for the rest of the year, including conversations with the Newsom administration, because they have an interest in a little project called the State Water Project also would be, caught up in all this as well. So it's going to be a long slog. It's going to be all the way, unless we catch lightning in a bottle, we're going to be battling this thing all the way until August.
I see a full employment act for water rights attorneys.
Yeah, we've been, your attorney, your general counsel's been involved in those meetings. We had to spend a lot of time this last 4 weeks trying to make sure the Association of California Water Agencies landed in the right place on this. And we were successful in doing so. So now we've got so Aqua staff is asked to be involved in our process, in our coalition, which is good. There's I think some hurt feelings maybe, I don't know, not on staff, but other members of the committee who felt we should take a lighter touch on bills like this. But the committee vote was like 19-16, which kind of concerns me, but it's majority rules, so we were able to get the positions that I felt were important. AB 1562, I just want to say that we get the bills back in 2018 on water conservation, urban water use objective. As you recall, we tried to make sure that local agencies had control over that and flexibility, but we keep seeing bills that whittle away that flexibility. This is one of them. Basically it says if you have non-functional turf, what that basically is like the verges in business parks or median strips. You don't have a lot of that up here. Decorative, stuff that's non-functional. People don't play on it or run on it, or that you can't use potable water anymore. To the extent that that's a desirable type of landscaping up here, if it's to the east of El Dorado Hills, it's going to have to get torn out at some point, because you won't, if this bill passes, you won't be able to use potable water to water that turf. We're recommending a opposed position, not because we like non-functional turf, but that should be your decision, not the state. Can I move to the next slide? No. So on these bills, I think, and the last water right bill thus far that we're looking at is SB 389. This would give the State Water Board the ability on a stream-wide basis to come in and say, we want everyone on the stream to prove up their water right. And in doing so, there's about 5 different analyses that the water right holder would have to produce at great expense, potentially. And there doesn't even have to be a reason for the state board to do it. There wouldn't have to be violations or someone taking water in a fully appropriated stream that didn't have a right. It's just, they just open up the whole stream system. So we don't want that to happen. Some of these other bills, I talked to SB 23 and SB 366. SB 23 is sponsored by Aqua, and it would expedite permitting by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Resources Control Board for water supply and flood risk reduction projects. We're recommending a favored position on that. SB 366, I have a watch here, but it's being amended this week. It's sponsored by California Municipal Utilities Association. I think we'll quickly move to a support position on this one. You're familiar with these aspirational goals on greenhouse gas reductions or electrification of vehicles, different things like that. This bill would set long-term water supply targets for the state of California, and it would require the Department of Water Resources to pull together a stakeholder group to work with to identify the best path forward to achieving those targets. So right now, the California Water Plan talks about different regions and what the water use is and what the local supply is and maybe what the demands in the future will be. But it doesn't take the next step of identifying projects, either groundwater storage, recycling, surface water storage, conveyance connections, It really doesn't get in that level of detail. That's what this bill is going to do. It's going to set a long-term water supply increase target for 2033 and 2043, and possibly even 2050, the last draft I saw, and then require this process to identify in the California Water Plan, which is updated every 5 years, how we get to that point. Next slide. 867 is the Senate Geo Resources Bond. So this kind of falls under miscellaneous. This AB 338 is a reintroduction of AB 1717 that you opposed last year. It would change the definition of a public work to include all of the fuel reductions and forest work. We'll continue to oppose that bill because of the cost increases. Even though the state's invested somewhere north of $8 billion on wildfire prevention, forest health, there's a greater need. We don't want to see these projects, either the number reduced or the costs go up for local agencies that are engaged in this work. Next slide. AB 1567 is the Assembly Democratic Caucus Resources Bond. And then, so SB 537 I included, even though it's a watch bill. It's a spot bill, but there's still a lot of pent-up demand by local agencies to allow for remote participation of directors in open meetings, kind of like you were able to do in the pandemic. While it's not as big of an issue, I think, for you all who are here on the West Slope, there are local agencies down in LA or some of these rural areas where directors have to, like the Board of Supervisors has to travel over the mountain pass to get to the meetings. So the committee chair in the Assembly, Assemblymember Cecilia Aguiar Curry, has told her caucus no remote participation bills this year. We'll see what happens. There hasn't been that declaration on the Senate side, so it's one of those things we're going to have to keep an eye on and see what happens. I'll answer any questions that you might have before I turn it back over to Ms. Leeper.
Any questions? Nope. Comment for me is I'm just reassured that they're watching out for us most of the time down, it looks like to me.
Trying.
I'm being facetious, yeah. Yeah, and thank you very much for last week meeting with Assemblymember Patterson, and appreciate all your efforts to do that. It was a great meeting, so.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Elizabeth.
All right. So today, option 1 for the board is approve recommendations of REEB Government Relations LLC as the district's official positions on proposed state legislation.
Move one.
And we recommend option 1.
All right. Second. Have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Public input. Anybody online, Jen?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 8, option 1, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer. Now is your time. President Veerkamp, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 8. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Do you still have vacation brain, Director Osborne?
I'm sorry.
Dreaming of those
I'm
penguins.
reading the next agenda.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Bob. Have a great day. Travel safe. Item 9, engineering, Mr. Money. Good morning.
I just have a question. This is well within the general manager's authority to, why are we doing this?
Director Osborne, this was the original contract was, I believe, for around 60,000. This change order brings that amount above the 100,000.
Oh, thank you.
general
Okay,
manager limit.
I got it.
So again, good morning. John Money, Senior Civil Engineer for the district, here this morning to discuss a contract change order for the El Dorado Hills wastewater treatment plant, waste activated sludge, dissolved air flotation rehabilitation project, better known as the El Dorado Hills WASDAF.
Was daft? You may want to change that acronym.
So again, the staff has been before the board a couple times on this item, originally in November of 2018 to present a design contract to Black & Veatch, followed by a construction contract early last year to T&T Industrial Contractors, and then again, most recently, incorporating it into the 5-year CIP plan that was approved last November. Summary of the issue, again, the El Dorado Hills WASDAF was originally constructed in 1997 and has been in continual use since its construction. Since that time, it has experienced significant deterioration and corrosion, and basically, most of the mechanical components of that system have reached the end of their life. The district is currently in a contract with T&T to replace the mechanical portions of that process equipment. But due to numerous supply chain issues and some minor design issues, the duration of that contract has been extended. So here on the left, we have a picture of the actual WASDAF unit. In the foreground is the actual basin where the processes separate the solids from the waste activated sludge. Behind it, to the left, with the domes on top, is where the mechanical equipment for this process is located. And then the smaller building on the right is the electrical room. And so all three portions there are affected by this project. In general, waste activated sludge, much like algae, does not settle. And so instead of relying on settling processes like we do on most of our treatment processes in both water and wastewater, the DAFT actually uses a air blanket with supersaturated air to float those solids to the top, where they're scraped or skimmed off the top. The sludge, that concentrated sludge blanket, is then conveyed to the anaerobic digester for processing, and then the remainder of flow is recirculated to the primary sedimentation basins for additional processing. So again, these are some photos of the deterioration that has occurred in the basin. It's important to note that all of these photos were taken before I was at the district, so this is about 6 or 7 years ago. It was in this kind of condition. The top left is the scraper arms. These have been patched several times in the past due to mechanical failures.
So you're saying these are older pictures?
Correct.
Okay.
So things usually don't get better over time.
Figured that one out.
The picture on the right is the central column, which is where the flow enters into the basin. Go next slide. Any of the solids that do settle are scraped off. These are the lower scraper arms, and you'll notice below those scraper arms, and then the picture on the right, we do also have some concrete imperfections that we will also be addressing throughout this project. So patching and skimming to, again, make sure that the basin itself meets its anticipated use, which is usually 75 to 100-year use. The additional scope we are talking about this morning is a 7-month contract extension for Hurwitz. That has included ongoing weekly construction meetings as we've tried to facilitate this project and get it all the way into construction, as well as elevated number of submittals and requests for information during that process. We've also had several design clarifications. One of those was the WASDAF structural supports, how that's supported in the basin. Some mechanical pump and piping clarifications. We had to relocate and coordinate that relocation with the contractor of the electrical switchgear for the new unit. And then we also added a polymer system, which was omitted during the previous design. Lastly, we've added the preparation of as-built drawings, so we have a complete record set following the construction of this process. So again, Hurwitz Engineering was previously awarded an on-call contract for just under $64,000 to provide bid assistance and construction engineering services for this project. Basically, we've eaten into that by the extent throughout the services that I just mentioned. We are proposing a change order to that contract for an additional $61,000 for the services, again, that I just mentioned. Those two contracts together bring the contract total to over $100,000, which requires board authorization. Funding and schedule. So this is a summary of the previously approved board budget for this project. Any change orders we've had to date. So we have had 4 change orders, and we've negotiated that to basically be cost neutral for the project. This change order, if approved today, will come from the contract contingency and won't affect the actual funds allocated to date to the project. It's important to note, so we've been floating, pun intended, for the construction schedule on this project. We are actually intending to start demoing the existing equipment tomorrow. We've had some problems getting the temporary WAS staff on site. That arrived last week and should be started today. Final completion is now estimated for the end of July of this year. So again, with that, staff is recommending option 1, which is to approve a contract change order to Hurwitz Engineering in the not-to-exceed amount of $61,466 for extended construction engineering support services for the El Dorado Hills Wastewater Treatment Plant Waste Activated Sludge Dissolved Air Flotation Thickening Unit Rehabilitation Project, project number 1835. Staff is recommending option 1.
I'll move option 1.
I'll second with a comment, of course.
Please go ahead.
I think this project's an example of how long it takes and how much study needs to go into these things and the time period that we continue to patch up and use old equipment. Back when first elected over 4 years ago, Director Anzini and I were toured by Mr. Crane in this, and he pointed out the weakness in not only this project or this equipment, but also the filters, and it's taken us almost 5 years to get from knowing there was an issue to actually moving on that. And it's hard to, I know we have to go through all the appropriate steps, but gee, that's a long time to keep old things running.
I think that goes to say, again, we have lots of issues throughout the district and a lot of old equipment. And so prioritizing that and getting it to the board and through the construction process, again, it just, we've got lots of conflicting priorities that we bring to the board.
Director Anzini?
Yeah, so I'll just follow up with Director Dreyer's comments. It's true. It seems like we're sludging through the problem very slowly. However, we have $1 billion infrastructure, and, it's hard to put the finger in the dike sometimes. So, much appreciation for keeping on this. But I want to know one thing. What does this have to do with the water that they can drink once it's been recycled? Now, the recycled water instrument there, nobody wanted to drink that water when they said, oh, we could drink it.
Well, so one, we don't drink our recycled water in the district. That's used for strictly irrigation only down in El Dorado Hills. This is just one step in the process. So this is treatment of the activated sludge, which is really the bugs and biological material that we use to break down everything so that we can then further purify it on the far end.
And we still need to set up a tour for elementary school kids.
Absolutely.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions? Anybody in the audience? Anybody online, Jen?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 9, option 1, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer. Please refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Veerkamp, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 9. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day. We are now on to item 10, Office of General Counsel, Mr. Polson.
Thank you, President Veerkamp. Because I have a lengthy PowerPoint presentation, I'd like to just sit here for that, if you don't mind. Just kidding, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation.
I was expecting one.
So,
Move one.
Second. You scared me.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Do you want to see the lengthy PowerPoint presentation? It's from the Golf Channel, right? Yeah, exactly. All right, any public comment? Seeing none, anybody online want to comment?
If members of the public would like to comment on action item number 10, option 1, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Day, please refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Veerkamp, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 10. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Hang on one second. Director Dwyer does
Oh,
want to comment.
sorry.
Sorry, that's all right.
I'd just like to say how fortunate we are to have a person of Brian's caliber to support us and advise us and sometimes give us advice that we don't like.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you, Pat.
yeah, thank you.
Brian Mueller appreciates it too.
Yeah.
How big a
John,
bottle, how big a
all right,
bottle of
that's
beer
what
did
I'm
he
talking about.
buy you to say that, make that comment?
I think it's important, well, to note as well, the consistency with what we've done across the board, and that came from you as well, Brian, so thank you so much for that.
And I would just comment that the sensitivity of capping the
Yep.
cost of living increases, I appreciated that as well.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what the consistency was. Okay, now we're ready for the vote. Please vote. Item 10.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, very good. Thank you, Brian. We will now recess to closed session. Estimate?
Thank you, President Veerkamp. I estimate that, today's closed session, I'm sorry, we will be meeting in closed session. The board will be meeting today to discuss the matter that's reflected on today's agenda as closed session item A, and I anticipate the board's consideration of this item will require at least 20 minutes.
Okay.
This meeting will, we will.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Jen, to interrupt. I'm going to adjust my estimate to 15 minutes. Thank you. We're going back to 20. Thank you.
Do we hear 25?
For simplicity, the board will not reconvene prior to 10:45. It could be after, and this meeting will, we will close this Zoom meeting and reopen, not before 10:45. However, they could reconvene after.
All right, we've returned from closed session. Council, do we have anything to report out?
President Veerkamp, the board met and deliberated with staff regarding the matter that's agendized today as closed session item A. It provided direction to staff but took no reportable action. And that concludes my report.
All right, very good. Review of assignments. We have those before us. Anything you
None today.
Okay. And we are ready to adjourn.
At 11:35.
We're out of here.